Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Okay, so yeah.
Stuart's going to get gruesome today.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this story. We're sort of jumping in the deep end of classic Old Testament bloodshed. A softer beginning may have been the way to go, but we're going to throw you in the deep end today as we continue through Kings.
Yeah.
So picking up from chapter 9, Stu,
Yeah.
of 2 Kings, is that right?
That's right, yep. So Thrive Deeper, episode 148, and we're picking up from 2 Kings, chapter 9. We're probably going to work our way through this, a fair few kings to work through, particularly in the life of Israel, but probably to the time of Hezekiah. That's what we'll try and get to this week anyway. But this is when Jehu becomes king of the northern kingdom in Israel, and he's anointed as king by Elisha in a secret kind of place, given the task then to destroy the house of Ahab.
Yeah. So it was. It had been prophesied over Ahab's household that it would, because of, the bloodshed. Really, that we see under Ahab's rule. Naboth, for example, that whole episode was sort of symptomatic of the kind of rule. Particularly with Jezebel's influence there.
And the institution of Baal as the official religion of Israel. There were just...
So the prophecy is that, Ahab's line is going to be wiped out. Now, Ahab's son Ahaziah rules, and then his son Jehoram, his other son Jehoram takes over after. Joram or Jehoram is the second son. So you've got two sons of Ahab on the throne after him, sequentially.
Yep.
And then Jehu is approached by, he's anointed by one of the prophets. At Elijah's instructions, go anoint Jehu, and
in fact the only king of the northern kingdom to be anointed.
Interesting, isn't it?
The only king of the northern kingdom.
Interesting.
Anointed.
And he is, and he's probably the closest of all of the northern kings. He's the closest one to sort of claiming that he has this zeal for Yahweh. Now, he falls short because he still, it says about Jehu that he still went along with the sins of Jeroboam. Now that's partner, because we've got to remember that the sin of Jeroboam was the setting up of the golden calves.
That's right.
Okay, so and Jehu's the king of the northern kingdom. So the pressure there is to have something for the people in the north, so they don't go down to Jerusalem, right? Otherwise they'll defect to Jerusalem. So Jehu. And also remember, the golden calves were really, in a sense, breaking the second commandment.
That's right.
More than the first, because the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. That was Ahab and the setting up of the Baals and so forth. The golden calves was really meant to be a sort of a familiar representation of Yahweh. So that was kind of breaking the second commandment. That's why they distinguish between the sin of Jeroboam and all the other things, because they say, well, okay, he didn't, he turned away from the sins of Ahab, the worship of the Baals and the Ashtoreths, but he kept,
the calves.
He kept the calves.
And Jehu actually eliminated Baal again, but as you say,
so he claims to, that's right. So he
Mm.
claims to have eradicated Baal worship in Israel. But he keeps the golden calves, which are meant to be these depictions of Yahweh. So in his mind, no, this is we're worshipping the true God, but we're worshipping in this form.
Yes.
So for him, he can sort of he can justify that in his mind. But so Jehu is the closest. Sort of gets the closest that a northern king gets to being sort of good. But he's in a sense chosen because he's a heavy-handed sort of guy. He's a military commander. He's a man of blood,
that's right,
and so he's anointed and told that he is to destroy the house of Ahab. He's all too happy to do that, but there's lots of collateral, isn't there?
Yes, that's exactly right.
He kills a lot of the household of Ahaziah as well, who's the king in the south. Ahaziah is killed, and a whole lot of his family as well as killed.
And pretty gruesomely as well. And in front of everybody, the head's at the gate. And
Jehu just goes on a killing spree.
right,
This is just ridiculous. And almost is savouring it a bit too much and justifying, come and see my zeal for the Lord. And it's just over the top.
Kind of illustrates that it's possible to do the right thing, but to do it in the wrong way.
Yeah, well, he's kind of doing what he was purposed to do. Exactly. And I think, there's a sense of sovereignty in this. I mean, God is wanting to execute judgment, but it's the same. It's kind of similar to the way that the way that Babylon is spoken of. Babylon is seen as the instrument of judgment in the Lord's hand.
Right.
But then Babylon is still condemned for almost the delight it took and its pride in doing that.
Right.
So in a sense, Jehu does the Lord's work in terms of bringing judgment upon the house of Ahab, but he just enjoys it a bit too much, and he's got a lot of ambition, and
it all becomes a bit more about him.
That's right, and the ambition comes in when I'll get rid of the Baals and the Ashtoreths. That's fine because we're going to get loose of this Phoenician influence through Jezebel.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll get rid of that. Oh, but I still need the golden calves because I don't want people going down to the church down the road.
Yeah,
so it's very much a sort of qualified success here. I think it's worth. Let's just pull out for a moment because the big picture I think is important, and I know listeners are probably likely to get a little lost in the midst of all of this complexity. So we're tracking with the kings of the north, the kings of the south, and we're kind of right in the guts of that. But to maybe orient us, we're on a fast track now. So Jehu is he rules for 28 years up to about 814. Now we're within a century, within 100 years. In biblical terms, that's not long. No. We're within 100 years of the complete destruction
and exile.
It's about 90 years away. Yeah. Is the complete destruction of the northern kingdom. And what you're going to see here is a trajectory towards this.
It kind of accelerates, doesn't it, from this point on? It really starts.
Yeah, that's right. So
pick up pace.
So Jehu in the northern kingdom, this is still when Elisha is around.
Yes.
Okay. Then we get his son Jehoahaz rules. Another he actually is going to have a dynasty of 4 generations.
That's right.
God has said you're going to have a dynasty of 4 generations. Now, that's not many, but still that's significant because none of the other northern kings have had more than sort of 2-3 generations.
Right.
So he gets the most. So we get Jehoahaz, Jehoash, Jeroboam II.
Yep.
I'm scooting over some stuff here, Stu, because I'm trying to get I'm trying to get big picture.
Yep.
Now, the third son after Jehu, Jeroboam II. This is a period of great prosperity. This is one of those examples where the biblical text doesn't give it much room. He just gets a paragraph.
Yes.
A couple of paragraphs in the Book of Kings. This is a time of great prosperity.
Yeah. He ruled for 41 years, so probably one of the longest.
That's right.
In the northern
and long rules do establish an element of stability, political stability. This is a time of great prosperity. Because it was a time of great prosperity, they're thinking, hey, we're God's people.
Yes.
God is blessing us. How good are we? But of course, this is the time, and it's actually at this time, this is when you start getting the prophecies of Isaiah, Amos, Micah, and remember, these prophets are speaking so much about injustice. There's so much injustice for all the prosperity. Right. There's a lot of oppression of the poor. The justice systems are all skewed in favor of the rich. So yes, there's a lot of prosperity, but there are lots of problems here. And of course, this is because they're operating just like the nations operate. At this point, the Northern Kingdom is indistinguishable from the other nations, and so they're going to fall with all of the other nations. They're not going to, God's going to treat them like He treated the other nations. Fine, if you want to be like that, if you want to be just like them, then you'll be given over
in
to
every
them.
way. Yeah, exactly.
And in every way they were. So,
and again, continue with the idolatry. That would just continued in Israel at that point in time. There was no sort of sense of moving away from that. So
so that's the trajectory. We'll say something about the trajectory in the north, and then we'll say something about the trajectory in the south. Yep. So after Jeroboam, you get this time of prosperity. As I said, it's the time when you got these great prophets are speaking, but they're not listening.
No.
So it's interesting to see, given that what we know about all of the prophetic activity, not only the prophetic activity of Elisha and Elisha under Jehu, but then the real dialing up of prophetic activity, and we have those a lot of the prophets like Isaiah and Micah and all those guys.
Starts to appear on the scene. Yep.
They're not listening to them. So what you get, Zechariah, who is the last of those four sons, he only rules for 6 months. He's assassinated by Shallum, who rules for 1 month. Shallum is assassinated by Menahem, a guy called Menahem.
Yeah.
Now, Menahem rules for 10 years, but he's then assassinated. His son rules, so he does have a son.
Yep.
He doesn't live. He doesn't live long.
No, that's right.
Right, he has short life. 10-year reign. His son Pekahiah rules, but he only rules for 2 years. Then he's assassinated by a guy called Pekah.
Yep.
Pekah has a longish rule, 20 years, but he's assassinated then by Hoshea, who rules for 9 years.
Yes.
And it's during this latter period that they're being hounded by Assyria, the kingdom of Assyria, which is coming down from the north, making incursions into the land. And Hoshea's kingdom is going to be northern kingdom is going to be completely wiped out.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. But what we should note there is all of these short rules, and it's just chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's interesting to note that even though it's the Assyrians that finish them off, what you see here is that what weakened them was the internal strife.
Yes.
Not the external pressure.
That's right.
It's these people, they crumbled internally, and that's a really important insight of the text. That it wasn't because of
the strength of the outside.
The strength of the outside forces. It was the weakness of what was happening within.
Israel. Yeah.
They're assassinating each other. There's no stability in this kingdom, and that's because they've abandoned their faith.
Yeah.
And it's one of the great. And essentially, this is their story becomes the story of all these other great kingdoms.
Yes.
The kingdom of Assyria itself, fell to a rebellious region, Babylon. The Babylonians fell to the Persians fell to the Greeks.
Yeah.
All of these kingdoms that rise and fall, and in just about every case, in every case, the problems actually are due to internal strife.
Yeah. And often with these things, they tried to buy their way into peace. So when these nations are coming, they're selling up and paying huge tributes and just trying to, and rather than relying on God and God's promises, it's
that's
like,
right.
We're going to do this in our own way because we're not sure we can, trust God in this. So
that's right.
Crazy.
And so, so I think that's a really important message come from us, is the lack of that internal such a message for us in that, Stuart's, that so much depends on our, even thinking individually, our internal stability. Actually, you can handle a lot of external pressure, because we often think, we've got to deal with all the external stuff, which is what they're constantly trying to do. And they've all got different ideas about how to do that. And so they're all arguing over that, and they're one's assassinating another, and I'm going to be the ruler, and now I'm going to be the ruler. This inner turmoil just destroys the nation. It's inner turmoil that destroys people's, that destroys our lives. It's that absence of a right orbit, as I'll put it.
Right.
And essentially a great way to, in a sense, picture what true worship is to picture it as a kind of right orbit, and when we have a right orbit, it's like the Earth orbiting the sun. It provides the conditions for life.
Yes.
But it's like what they did here is they cut themselves off from their orbit.
Right.
And everything, all the stability gets lost because of this loss of orbit. Now, things aren't perfect. Let's go to the north. Things aren't perfect in the north. In the south.
Yes.
Things aren't perfect in the south down in Jerusalem. After Jehoshaphat, you've got 3 kings, Jehoram, who rules for 8 years, Ahaziah only for 1 year. After that, you've got this Athaliah,
Who's not even...
who thinks,
Yeah.
I'm going to, because that's Ahaziah's mother.
Yes.
After Ahaziah dies, she thinks, well, I'm going to take over now.
Yeah.
So she kills off the royal family.
Yep.
So this is a moment of turmoil. You've had two kings in a row who have been these ungodly kings. And of course, you start to get, this is the interesting thing about the story, you start to get the same kind of chaos here.
Yeah.
Because she's killing off, because it looks like, from a literary point of view, in terms of the flow of the story, wow, this is a real threat to the Davidic promise,
That's right.
the promise of the Davidic dynasty.
Yeah.
This is the line of Christ at, that promise to David that you will have a descendant forever on the throne. This is now under threat as when Ahaziah dies and his mother wants to take over, she's going to kill off the rest of the royal family.
And definitely not on the Davidic line, that's for sure.
No, that's right.
So kind of a bit of an anomaly
That's
there
right.
in the whole line of everything.
So she's suddenly, she's taking over and
tries to eliminate everybody else who could challenge that.
yeah, that's right.
Thankfully, there's a priest,
Yeah, that's right.
Jehoida, who,
But of course, there's a survivor. This is the, there's this that gets hidden away in the temple. Even there's a symbolism to that.
Yeah.
The godly priest Jehoida hides this young kid Joash away in the temple. When he comes of age, he is revealed to the people, and they, come out in support, unanimous support. Athaliah hasn't been popular. You see, there's enough kind of faith and loyalty to the Davidic line in the northern. There's enough stability, even though there's been, due to Jehoshaphat
in the southern. Yep.
in the southern kingdom.
Yep.
There's enough stability there that there's still this loyalty to the Davidic line, and so Joash is put on the throne.
Now, Joash was just an infant when he was hidden, and only 7 years old.
That's right, yeah.
And so Jehoida continues to play a pretty important role in a sense.
The high
guiding.
priest,
Exactly.
So Jehoida guides him. It's when Jehoida dies and Joash comes of age that he loses the plot, because he's Jehoida, it's really about influence. Jehoida is his major influence up to that point, but when Jehoida dies, it's his officials who are the major influence. They're probably the officials that served under, Jehoram and Ahaziah. And
Jehoida again made the effort. He pulled down tore down the temple to Baal and
that's right.
He did a lot to try to draw back, the people from where they were. But again, once Joash, as you say, once Jehoida died, Joash kind of, reverted back really to the high places and things started to go.
So you get, and just trying to think in general patterns here. So there's always this comparison with the north and the south. And things aren't, there's always this chaos threatening, this chaos that we see in the north. I'm getting my north and south.
Okay.
Do you know why I am? Because in the text, they always talk about up to Jerusalem.
Yes.
Because it's, so
it's a high place. Yeah.
So I keep thinking up, anyway. I'm getting...
Actually, I think that's a really good point, because they talk about high places a lot here.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that God only appointed one high place for sacrifice, which was in Jerusalem. So when they keep saying they continued with sacrifices on the high places, you kind of go, so what's the problem with that? Well, because God had said, this is the only place.
And the whole point was it was meant to be centralized. It was meant to be a central place where they were to, find their common identity. Yeah. Anyway, so in terms of general patterns, so in the north, you've got this pattern of demise, chaos in the northern kingdom of Israel that leads to the destruction it's in 722 when the Assyrians come in. This is threatening. This chaos is threatening. So you see this under Athaliah, it's threatening. And then you get these three kings, Joash, Amaziah, and then Uzziah. So 40-year reign, Joash, Amaziah 29 years, Uzziah 52 years. It's much more stability here in the southern kingdom of Judah. But you also get this feature, this kind of Solomon feature, where they start well, and then towards the end it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And this is partly because in that much time they become quite prosperous. It's like they start well, but they lose the plot later on. It's a very sad trajectory.
Yes.
It's the trajectory of Judah overall. We see that preempted by the life of Solomon, the very sad story of Solomon, who begins well and gradually loses the plot. Well, you see this with these three kings, Joash, Amaziah, and Uzziah. Then you get this king Jotham, and he's a good guy. And next session we'll talk a bit more about Ahaz. I think,
Yes.
Stu.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bit. So Ahaz is a really bad guy. You know, he's
Probably the worst.
well, he's the second worst after Manasseh.
Yes.
That we'll talk about.
So far, then.
Yeah, in the southern kingdom of
Yes.
Judah. But so far,
Yeah.
he'll be the worst. Let's go up north to the northern kingdom, and there's a really interesting point in chapter 17 where the writer pauses. So the northern kingdom gets completely destroyed by the Assyrians. They come and just wipe it out. Now, the interesting thing, it was the same campaign when they went to Jerusalem, because on the same campaign they went to Jerusalem as well.
Yes.
But Jerusalem was delivered,
Yes.
and the northern kingdom wasn't. This is this comparison again.
Yeah.
So when Hoshea was ruling, you've got Hezekiah in Jerusalem. After they destroy Israel, they obviously, they go to Jerusalem and they're going to destroy Jerusalem. But Jerusalem is delivered by this amazing act of God. Now, what's implied there is that the northern kingdom could have been saved as well.
Yes.
Right, but they didn't rely on God.
Yeah.
And so you get this summing up of this, the kind of the tree is trimmed down to just Judah in the south. Judah and Benjamin, because Benjamin's absorbed.
Yes.
The tribe of Benjamin is absorbed into Judah. The tribe of Simeon, by the way, is sort of scattered all over the place a bit, but they're going to be Judah or the Jews. They are going to now become the remnant.
Yes.
So, in a sense, this is the really drastic pruning of the tree of the people of God, essentially. Yeah. And so they're scattered. What happens is that the Assyrians came in, they conquered Samaria, they laid siege to it, they completely destroyed it, they carried off the surviving people, and they scattered them throughout the lands of the east.
Yep.
The idea is that they'll just assimilate
That's
there.
right.
Now, again, the same thing is going to happen to Judah, but Judah will survive that. Judah won't assimilate, and so they later on are going to survive exile. But
right.
what you're never going to hear from the Israelites, the northern kingdom people again, because they're lost really among the nations. And in a sense, the gathering in of the nations is in a sense the fulfillment of the gathering in of the northern tribes, because they just become the nations. Yeah. So, and then the area is resettled. So what the Assyrians will do is they'll resettle the area with people from their empire, and that's the way of trying to keep. So there are some people remaining, but they're going to intermarry and they're going to create this group of people called the Samaritans. Who are going to be hated by the Jews because they're, a bit of a mixed race of Assyrians.
And they were the northern kingdom, and anyway,
that's right. So,
but chapter 17 is a really great summary of everything that went wrong, really, in the northern
that's
kingdom
right.
in Israel,
and it stops to really state the message. This happened not because they were political. It wasn't about how strong the Assyrians were, because we see at Jerusalem. They were vastly outnumbered under a great siege, and God delivered them there, right? This is because they worshipped idols.
That's right.
This is because they turned away from it. This is because they didn't listen to God. And it says here, God came to them again and again and again. He pleaded with them. He spoke to them, but they consistently rejected them. And so he gave them over to the hands of their plunderers in 17 verse 20 until he thrust them. It's a very sad statement. It says, therefore the Lord rejected all the people of Israel. He afflicted them and gave them into the hands of plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. Yeah. He is. This is God's response to their rejection of him.
Yes. Yep.
Literally hundreds of years he's pleading with them to come back, and yet this consistent rejection causes this to happen. Yeah. And it's a very sad ending to the story.
And this is being written at the time when they're in exile already. So this is the
that's right. Yeah.
So this is reflecting back on, telling the story of how they got where they are.
Well,
what happened in Israel.
the story's written during Judah's exile.
That's right.
So they're reflecting on the exile of
Israel.
So this, what we're suffering now, actually was suffered by the northern tribes. Right. And so this, it's interesting, this summary in chapter 17 is really a message to the Jews in exile.
Yes. That's right.
because now they're in exile and they need to face what they've done. And if they do and they come back to God, then they'll be delivered from exile. That was the promise of Jeremiah. And they did.
Yes, that's right.
They heeded this lesson. They heeded this lesson and they turned back. And I think, this is, it's really worth pausing on chapter 17 and just reflecting how hundreds of years of resistance built up, and how persistent God was in trying to get through to them. It just, I think it's a sobering message. God is always speaking to us. I feel like we invest so much in feeling like, oh, we're right, but actually there's so much more to gain by realizing that when you're actually in the wrong.
Yes.
This is what God through his prophets was looking for. Just admit that you've got it wrong. Just turn back to me. And, but they, their consistent refusal to do that.
And the biggest theme all the way through chapter 17 really, as they reflect on this, is the fact that they just continued to worship idols. I mean, that was the biggest thing. And even though there was some obedience, partial obedience is actually disobedience.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you can't, well, I got 80% of it right, no, that God's a jealous God.
And essentially what they really did, the nature of this idolatry, see, in their minds, they're just adding Yahweh to all the other gods.
That's right, syncretism.
But often that they are really going to the other gods first, and they're mixing it all together. And I just think that's something that we always need to be reminded of.
Yes, yeah.
That this is that who is the one that we're ultimately trusting in? Who is the one that we go to first? Who is the one that really sets the agenda for our lives? Because it's so easy, to get all of these influences from the world around us, and God gets what is left.
Yeah.
So the question I think we need to ask ourselves in a light of this message in chapter 17 is, who really is our God? Who really is the major influence? Who is really our number one?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all our resources and much more at our website thrivetoday.tv. We really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading as we go through the Bible with Thrive. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper and thrive.